At Madison Township at the school. The first call went out at 11:15 a.m. that there was a shooting in the school. There was an active shooter at that point. There was 4 people injured in this incident. The 2 victims that were shot was Cameron Smith, age 15, Cooper Caffrey, age 14. Those 2 people were shot. The next 2 people, the way we understand it, they were injured either by shrapnel from the handgun or by injuries getting away from the active shooter. Brant Murray, age 14. Catherine Doucette, age 14. The victim, these are the 4 victims, and it appears at this point that the victims are all in stable condition as we speak. The suspect, James Austin Hancock, 14 years old, has been charged. He's a male, charged with 2 counts, attempted murder, F1, 2 counts felonious assault, F2, inducing panic, F2, making terrorist threats, F3. The suspect is in JDC at this time. He's been interviewed. We're waiting for the court system and the prosecutor's office. At this point, I will say that you always hear about these shootings in other places. You don't think that the odds are against it happening here. There's over 3,000 sheriff's offices in the United States, thousands of police departments, thousands of school districts. It always happens somewhere else. But also at this school, we have a school resource officer that was in the cafeteria where the shooting took place, minutes before the shooting took place. He left the cafeteria, heard the shots fired, returned to the cafeteria. At that point, the shooter, which is James Hancock, ran out of the building, ran up on the hill in front of the school, and it appears that he got rid of his handgun at that point and kept on running. He was apprehended up on top of the hill. It appears still on school grounds. He was arrested at that point, and he is in juvenile at this point, and that'll be up to the court system. We're still working on where the weapon came from, but it does appear that he had this weapon for the first part of the morning in the school with him. Where that weapon was, we do not know at this point, or we cannot release at this point. The crime scene is a large crime scene, and it takes time to get the crime scene worked, photographed, the detectives, the sheriff's office. The response was great. Naturally, when this kind of thing happens, it affects all the schools in the rest of the district and outside our district. I've had calls of schools that's not even in this county that were either in lockdown or were nervous and concerned, and police officers were called to the schools in other jurisdictions also. Also, when these happen, these shootings, you always get, there's more than one shooter. There might be 3 shooters. There's a gun in this locker. Is it true this took place? And when we first get to the scene, we're trying to review all this information that's coming in very rapidly. And then we have the parents that naturally want to get their kids out of the school and to see if they're safe. So there was one shooter, it appears. We'll know more as the night goes on. As far as our investigation continues, was there others that were involved or knew about this? Not that we're aware of at this point, but the investigation is continuing as we go. I want to thank all the law enforcement that responded to this area. We had the federal government, we had the state law enforcement, the federal law enforcement, we had local jurisdictions, we had our own there, and are still here. It's a joint effort. I can't list them all. There were so many. But I will take questions at this time. We also met with the school today before I left the school, myself and Chief Dwyer and Major Kraft. We met with the school teachers, the school administrators, and we had a debriefing of what took place, and for them to prepare. That'll be up to the schools, how they handle as far as the briefing and working with the parents, working with the kids in the schools. Again, it's a pretty traumatic experience. Imagine being in a cafeteria when you were growing up and you were in school and you're eating lunch, and then all of a sudden there's an active shooter. Everything you've seen in school or you've seen on the news, and you prepare for it, you train your kids for it, sometimes goes out the window when the first shot's fired. You just think it can't happen. And then you be a parent at home and you get that call or you get that notice. You get there very quickly, and we understand. And it was, like I said, organized to the best that you can do in a situation like this. Now, I will take questions. There's some things I can't answer, but I'll tell you if I can't or I don't know the answer. You will have this information handed out to you, so you won't have to know the correct spelling. You'll have that handed out to you. And so, go ahead.
For clarification, at this time, are these adult or juvenile charges?
These are juvenile charges at this moment.
You mentioned that he was taken into custody on the Hill. Was it the school resource officer who actually made that arrest, and how long was that after the shooting occurred?
Major Kraft?
The arrest occurred within probably 10 or 15 minutes. The school resource officer attended to the victims first while squads, other units responded, and then the efforts were first a perimeter to set up, and once that was set up, that contained him, and then a dog was brought in, a track was made, he was found in the wooded area. Once he saw the dog, he stood up and surrendered.
Is that something you can repeat on camera for us?
Come on up here. This is Chief Dwyer, Sheriff's Office.
Yes, what happened was when the call went out, obviously multiple units responded to the scene. The SRO saw the guy take off. He was tending to the victims, waiting for the squads to come. They set a perimeter up around the school to try and contain him. The first thing you want to do is contain your suspect. So we did that, and then from there we branched out to search for him, and a dog was able to track him very quickly and take him into custody. The next thing we were doing once they got the victims out was to try and, you got to put everybody in place. In other words, freeze the school, freeze movement of all the kids. You don't know if you're going to have another shooter in place or not. So we did that. Then we methodically went through the school to search it. One of the children that was injured had run and hid, and they were missed originally, so we had to do a second search of the school to make sure there wasn't another shooter or anyone else injured. And then once we did that, we got a staging area for obviously the media and the parents. With social media today, it's a very quick response. Parents come straight to the school when something happens, and you really don't want every parent driving right up to school while you're dealing with an active shooter. So we set a staging area up for there, and then once we had that all under control is when we were able to try and move the students out to their parents as quickly as we could.
It went pretty good today as far as getting the parents hooked up with their kids. And again, imagine when you hear this and you see this, we had a couple employees that also had kids in the school. One of our captains did, and multiple kids, more than one. So imagine when you get there and all the parents, we all understand that, but this investigation is still fluid right now. It's the juvenile shooter, and as far as the motive goes, we hear lots of rumors. We're trying to work on the motive, and we'll have more information as it materializes. A couple more questions. Yes, ma'am.
What type of handgun was used? If you don't know
It appears that it was a .380. When I say it appears that way by look. We haven't. That'll all be sent to BCI for further examination, and we'll make a determination. The question was of how many bullets. We don't have an exact number yet. The shooter told us he shot so many times, but we found more casings than that. And it appears it's a semi-automatic weapon, and when you pull the trigger, and if you're 14 years old, maybe you don't know how many times you're shooting the weapon, maybe. So we don't know that at this time. One more question over here.
Do we know who the gun is registered to? Is it a family?
We got an idea. We're working on that as we speak. Yes, ma'am.
Just talk to me about how you already addressed it to some degree, but the response here. How do you train for something like this?
The question was, how do you respond, or how do you train for the response? We've been training for these response to these school shootings, sadly to say, for years. The school has been training how to respond to these shootings for years. and you respond, and it's a muscle memory. When you hear there's an active shooter in the schools close down, they have certain alarm systems that go off, the teachers know what to do, how they train, what the students actually know what to do, and it's like fire drills. Now, us in law enforcement, we know we got to respond there first, and if the shooter is still shooting and still in the school, we have a response to where we go in immediately. First one's on the scene. This one was not that case. The shooting was over, and the shooter had left the school, so we had an opportunity to attend to those that were shot. In an active shooter that's still in the schools, you actually got to go in and you got to work on stopping the active shooter. So it's muscle memory, and we've been training for years, but it's still, when you get hit like that, it's all goes out the window, and the muscle memory kicks in. So it's a pretty good response, really a great response. Very satisfied with all of our response people and all the law enforcement, the medical people that were there. Everybody, this is a community where everybody knows everybody, and everybody has family members or friends that go to that school. Then we have to get all the kids in a certain area, find out the witnesses, and then get them to their parents that are there, and the others to the bus, and those that don't get picked up, we have to figure out how to get them home. And we still got to have a crime scene and work on this activity. I'll take a couple more questions.
Did you still have a gun on him when you apprehended him?
No, the gun was just thrown as he was running, apparently. One more question?
Sheriff, can you give us a picture of Hancock?
No, cannot. Not at this time.
Sheriff, if you
Did
can
it
talk
found
about
that the kids were targeted?
Please? The question was, were the kids
Does
targeted?
it appear that these kids were
We
targeted?
can't release that information at this point. You know, were they targeted? Were they random? At this point, we know the victims that were shot, and we don't know or can't release the reason why at this point.
Sheriff, you talked about how you respond by mass memory, but for a personal standpoint, when you get the call, you probably not had time to decompress yet, but what goes through your mind as a sheriff when you get the call that this is happening here?
Well, it's pretty simple. What goes through my mind as the sheriff?
Yes.
My throat swells up, and I start sweating. And then you start thinking, how bad is it? And it's a terrible feeling. And it's a terrible feeling anytime something like that goes down. Imagine the deputies that are getting the call, and they're having to go. What are they going to see? What they've been trained for? It's something that kicks in. That's what they're trained for. That's why they're professionals. We get there and we decompress days after. My part's a lot different than what the one that's the first one on the scene. Imagine getting there not knowing if you're not going to have to shoot somebody in school, another student, with a gun. You don't know, but you know there's been shootings. Is it your family? Is it your friends? It's our community. It's what you see on TV. It's pretty tough. And to this day, it seems as though there's more school shootings. There's more school shootings. There's police officers being shot. It's the times we live, and you got to prepare and train for that. One more question, then we'll have another conference.
What made him flee the building? I mean, he obviously was armed.
I have to assume, I'm not in his head. I have to assume he's 14 years old. I have to assume he maybe didn't have a plan. I have to assume that.
So
But
your
I'm
officer-
assuming that. Please?
I thought maybe your officer might have.
We know why he fled the building, but we're not going to release that at this point. Naturally, this is an ongoing investigation. But one last question. You've had like 8 questions. Go ahead.
Were any other weapons found inside the school? With any
No,
connection to
that was the only weapon that was found. There's always rumors of more weapons, more shooters, and that's the way it is all over the country. And at the same time, the officers that are on our scene, they're looking at kids that are shot. Are there more? The teachers, the witnesses, and where's the shooter? Is the shooter still there? Is there multiple shooters? And then the next group comes in, you got to have a bigger picture. You got to set up a command post. You got to talk to the news media. You got to alert the family. We got to have a place for the family to go to. We got people. It's a multiple scene and lots of different tentacles to it. That ends the press conference at this time, and I appreciate you all showing up and helping get the word out. Any of the pertinent information, spelling, things like that, there'll be somebody here to give you that. Thank you very much.